Hey guys, tonight we drift into a story that rises slowly, stone by stone, across centuries. Imagine the cold wind brushing your cheeks, carrying the smell of damp earth and wood smoke, while somewhere in the distance a torch flickers against a crude wooden wall. That's where you are tonight, standing at the beginning of castles, long before they became the towering giants you picture in fairy tales. And just so you know, you probably won't survive this world, muddy boots, no central heating, and the constant threat of raiders. But hey, at least it'll help you fall asleep. And first, like the video and subscribe the channel. Yes, right now, before you sink too deep into history. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Midnight in London? 3 a.m. in Mumbai? Or maybe 10 p.m. in Toronto? I always get curious. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander back in time, around the year 900, when castles weren't castles yet. What stood on the landscape were more like nervous little experiments in survival. Picture a muddy hill hastily scraped together by peasants under orders, topped with a wooden tower that looks more like a watchman's shack than a royal palace. This is the mound, and around it, a ditch filled with water or just mud, marking the boundary of safety. The world you move through is tense. Viking raids slash along the coasts. Magyar horsemen thunder through the heartlands, and no village feels safe. So lords improvise. They order peasants to pile up earth, build timber walls, sharpen logs into deadly stakes, and pray it holds back attackers. This is defense on a shoestring budget. You feel the mud clinging to your boots as you climb the slippery slope. No grandeur yet, only desperation. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind. Historians often agree that after the fall of the Carolingian Empire, Europe fractured into dozens of petty lordships. Without central protection, these small wooden forts became necessary. But here's the odd detail. Some of these forts had chicken coops inside, because lords needed eggs as much as they needed soldiers. Imagine a warrior in chainmail tripping over a squawking hen on his way to the ramparts. Not exactly glamorous. The wooden walls creak in the wind. Inside, a smoky fire barely warms the hall. Lords sit on benches draped with animal skins, more drafty barn than royal throne room. You hear peasants muttering outside, carrying buckets of water, shoveling mud, their faces gaunt with exhaustion. The castle is as much a burden as a refuge. Scholars still argue whether these early moats were actually effective defenses, or more like psychological comfort blankets. Did they really stop an invasion? Or did they just buy time for the lord to escape while peasants suffered? Either way, you sense the uncertainty. Every torch that flares in the night might signal raiders. Every horse whinny might be an enemy scout. As you drift closer into the firelit hall, the smell hits you: stale beer, damp straw, and bodies that rarely bathe. You look up at the rafters, where smoke gathers, choking the air. Yet here, power is being born. The seed of the stone castle is hidden inside this fragile wooden frame. Lords demand loyalty, peasants hope for protection, and the cycle of defense and fear hardens into habit. You catch the faint sound of a horn in the distance. Not an alarm, not yet, but enough to quicken your pulse. The guards shift uneasily at the gate, their spears heavy, their eyes tired. And you realize, this is where the shadow of castles begins, not in beauty, not in glory, but in mud, fear, and flimsy wood that stands only because people hope it will. You trudge further into the medieval mist, boots sinking into damp soil. The air smells of churned earth, sharp and metallic, as though the land itself has been wounded. You pause at the base of another mound, bigger than the last, higher, deliberately shaped by dozens of tired hands with shovels and wooden carts. This is no natural hill. This is a motte, an artificial mound heaped up from endless digging. And at its base, a trench yawns open like a scar, the ditch. Together, they form the early blueprint of what you will come to know as the Motte and Bailey Castle. You look around, and you see peasants everywhere, sweating under the weight of baskets filled with mud and clay. Children run back and forth carrying water, their small hands red from cold. The work is endless. Piles of soil get dumped onto the mound, layer after layer, as the hill slowly swells into a defensive perch. Above it, a flimsy wooden tower will soon rise. But for now, it's just mud. Mud and more mud. A mainstream historical fact presses against your thoughts. The Motte and Bailey design first became widespread in 10th and 11th century northern Europe, particularly in Normandy. Lords needed a quick and relatively cheap way to fortify themselves. A mound could be built in weeks. A wooden keep on top could be erected in days. Speed was everything. If raiders were coming, you didn't have the luxury of carving stone. Oddly enough, though, not every mound was made of soil. In some places, they used refuse, yes, trash, animal bones, and broken pottery mixed in with clay to bulk up the hill. So the next time you imagine a grand medieval lord surveying his mighty motte, remember he might literally be standing on a pile of garbage. Scholars still argue whether the ditches were more symbolic or practical. Some say they rarely held much water, and in dry summers, they were nothing more than trenches full of weeds. Others claim the ditches served as perfect traps. You lean over one now, peering into the shadowy gap. It's filled with murky rainwater, buzzing with flies. A haven for frogs and mosquitoes. The smell makes you recoil. Defense and disease, hand in hand. The Bailey spreads out before you, the enclosed courtyard at the base of the motte. It's little more than a fenced yard with crude huts inside, but life pulses here. Blacksmiths hammer at bent iron, sparks flying. Women stir great pots of porridge, steam billowing. Chickens scuttle underfoot, and a pig squeals angrily as a boy tries to drag it toward a pen. You realize the Bailey is as important as the mound. It's where people live, work, and serve. Without it, the motte is just an isolated perch. The wooden palisade surrounding the Bailey groans in the wind. You run your fingers across the sharpened stakes, rough, splintered, sticky with sap. The wall isn't impressive by modern standards, but in a world where most peasants lived in huts with thatched roofs, this fence is terrifyingly serious. It marks a line between power and vulnerability, between those inside and those outside. You notice the rhythm of daily life here. A guard shouts from atop the wall. A woman carries a bucket of sloshing water from the nearby stream. A group of children chases a dog, laughing, until their mother scolds them back to work. And all the while, the ditch gapes just beyond the palisade, an ever-present reminder of danger. The Lord himself appears in the Bailey, tall in a padded tunic, flanked by 2 men-at-arms. His face is weathered, stern, his eyes sharp as he surveys the progress. You watch him climb the mound, his boots sliding in the loose earth. At the top, he turns, overlooking his people, his domain. It's not a palace, not yet, but it's something. It says, "Here I rule. Here you obey." You imagine the tension at night. Torches flickering, shadows stretching across the ditch. The wooden walls creaking as the wind presses against them. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls. Raiders could come at any moment. The peasants sleep in their huts, curled on straw mats, while guards shift restlessly at their posts. Every creak of the palisade could be an intruder. Every splash in the ditch could be an enemy wading through. Your footsteps crunch over straw and soil. The bailey feels alive, but also fragile. You realize these early castles were never meant to last forever. Timber rots, earth shifts, fires consume. Yet for centuries, this design will dominate the European landscape, multiplying across hillsides, riversides, and coastal plains like a rash of wooden teeth biting into the earth. You sit on the edge of the ditch now, listening to frogs croak in the muddy water. The stars shimmer faintly overhead, and for a moment, you understand the strange mix of pride and fear these early builders must have felt. They were inventing a future of stone and power, but for now, they lived in wood and mud, always one bad storm or raid away from disaster, slowing down attackers while defenders rained down arrows. You climb the slope of another motte, slightly taller than the last, feeling the strain in your legs as the mud squelches beneath your boots. The wooden walls creak ominously above you, swaying slightly in the wind, a constant reminder that these structures are alive in their own way, vulnerable to rot, weather, and enemy attacks. You glance at the ditch below, its edges slick and uneven, water murky from rain and mud. Crossing it would be treacherous, a mistake easily punished. The bailey stretches out at the base, a chaotic cluster of wooden huts, open fires, and haphazard animal pens. Peasants shuffle through the muck, carrying baskets of water or heaping soil onto the motte. Children dart through the legs of adults, chasing each other while pigs squeal and chickens cluck, all under the watchful eyes of a few armed guards. The scene is noisy, chaotic, and smells overwhelmingly of smoke, sweat, and animals. You take it all in, realizing this is the heartbeat of the early castle, the disorderly life that gives purpose to the defensive mound above. A mainstream historical fact lingers in your mind. These timber castles, though simple, spread rapidly across Europe during the 10th and 11th centuries because they could be built quickly by local labor. Lords needed quick fortifications as political power fractured. The motte and bailey design offered visibility, defensive advantage, and a clear assertion of authority. You can see why. The height of the motte gives you a view for miles, making anyone approaching the fort easy to spot. Oddly, some of these early mottes included secret compartments or tunnels beneath the wooden tower. In case of a siege or sudden attack, lords or valuables could be hidden away. You crouch to peer at a narrow opening near the base of the mound, half expecting to see a trapdoor. It's a small, almost comical attempt at security, but clever nonetheless, a medieval version of hiding your keys under the doormat. Scholars still argue whether these wooden keeps offered real defensive strength or primarily psychological reassurance. Some say a determined enemy could burn or topple the structures within hours. Others insist that combined with a ditch and palisade, they were remarkably effective deterrents. You run your fingers along the rough timber of the palisade and imagine the tension of raiders probing for weak spots, torches glowing in the night, arrows nocked and ready. Inside the bailey, daily life continues uninterrupted despite looming danger. A blacksmith hammers on a bent piece of iron, sparks flying into the chilly air. Women stir thick porridge in massive cauldrons, while children fetch water from a nearby stream, careful not to trip in the mud. A dog barks at a startled chicken, and a pig squeals indignantly as it's herded into a pen. The motte and ditch above serve as protection. Yet life down here is anything but serene. It is constant motion, a choreography of survival and service. Your gaze shifts to the lord atop the motte, perched in his modest wooden tower. He watches the workers with an air of authority that contrasts sharply with the fragility of the structure beneath him. A gust of wind makes the timber sway slightly, and for a moment, You imagine the entire fort collapsing like a house of cards. But it holds, stubbornly, despite rain, mud, and neglect. This precariousness seems to define early castle life. Power is asserted not through comfort, but through visible, fragile dominance. You notice the practical details of life inside the keep. Barrels of rainwater are stored near the walls. Fires are stoked to provide warmth, though smoke escapes through crude gaps. Guards pace along the narrow walkways, peering out over the bailey, while a ladder leans against the tower, the only access between earth and wood. Every plank, every nail, every rope is vital. A single misstep could turn daily life into catastrophe. Outside, the ditch is alive with insects, frogs, and waterfowl. Its murkiness reminds you that medieval engineering was as much about improvisation as intention. Rain fills depressions unevenly, sometimes creating muddy traps for animals or humans alike. You imagine raiders attempting a crossing, slipping and falling into the water, frustrated, giving defenders precious seconds to react. Even in its imperfection, the ditch is a clever barrier, both literal and psychological. The wind rustles through the timber walls, carrying with it a scent of smoke and wet earth. You close your eyes briefly, picturing the motte and bailey at night, torchlight flickering against mud walls, shadows stretching across the courtyard, a lone guard silhouette pacing slowly. The chaotic life below continues unabated, a rhythm of existence that is both exhausting and strangely hypnotic. For a moment, you feel the weight of history pressing down, not as a distant academic concept, but as tangible presence. This motte, this ditch, this bailey, these workers, they are the ancestors of the stone castles that will dominate landscapes centuries later. And yet, here, in this raw, wooden, muddy beginning, the seeds of power, fear, and architecture are quietly being sown. You wander back along the edge of the ditch, careful not to slip, and reflect on how something so simple, mud, timber, a trench, can carry such significance. The early castles are not monuments of grandeur. They are experiments in survival, assertions of control, and early attempts at a language of power written in earth and wood. They are fragile, temporary, and yet profoundly important. You step closer to another early fort, where the first stones have started to replace wood. The air feels heavier here, as if the earth itself knows the weight it is about to bear. Timber walls are being dismantled, and rough-hewn stones are being hauled up the motte, forming the foundations of a keep that will last centuries. Every stone is awkward, irregular, yet significant. The transition from wood to stone marks not just strength, but ambition. The courtyard below buzzes with activity. Peasants and masons work side by side, carrying stones on wooden sledges or balancing them on shoulders. Sparks from a makeshift forge light up faces streaked with sweat and dirt. Children dart between legs, avoiding falling stones while trying to help where they can. The smell of wet stone, dust, and burning charcoal mingles with the ever-present scent of damp earth. You inhale deeply, realizing that even in discomfort, there is a strange rhythm to this labor. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. The first permanent stone keeps began to appear in Europe during the late 10th and early 11th centuries. Lords wanted not just defense, but permanence, a structure that would survive generations of raids, storms, and fires. Timber could be burned, mud could erode, but stone promised endurance. You can almost see the logic in every heave of a stone block, every mortar smear on the walls. Oddly, though, some early stone keeps incorporated wooden floors and roofs for ease of construction. These hybrid structures were vulnerable to fire, yet they allowed faster occupation while the stone walls slowly rose. You peer inside a half-built keep, where the frame of a wooden ceiling holds up the beginnings of stone walls. Imagining how precarious life must have been for those living there. One misplaced foot could send a worker tumbling into a pile of stones below. Scholars still argue whether these early stone keeps were intended primarily for defense or as status symbols. Some believe the imposing walls were psychological tools, designed to awe neighbors and peasants as much as to repel attackers. You climb a narrow, muddy path around the keep, feeling the rough surface of stones beneath your fingers. The height of the structure is both intimidating and impressive, even in its incomplete state. Inside the half-built keep, daily life adapts to the new materials. A blacksmith works in a corner, forging iron brackets and hinges for doors. Women stir thick stews in large cauldrons, balancing them over smoky fires. Children scurry, carrying small bundles of sticks or water, their small hands blistered from the constant labor. The keep is alive, even though it is not yet complete, a living, breathing structure in transition. The walls themselves are uneven, rough, and patched with temporary mortar. You run your hand along a jagged stone, feeling the effort embedded in every chisel mark. The stones are irregular, some chipped, some oddly shaped, but together they form a protective shell. The masons argue quietly, debating which stones fit best, while overseers bark instructions, a constant tension between precision and speed. Outside, the moat, still mostly earth and mud, has begun to take on a more defined shape. It channels rainwater effectively enough to create a defensive barrier, though it remains shallow in places. You look down into the water and see frogs leaping, insects skimming the surface, and the occasional reflection of a half-built wall shimmering in the murky depths. It's a small, almost comic reminder of nature persisting amidst human ambition. Guards patrol the perimeter, their eyes sharp, spears at the ready. They navigate the uneven terrain carefully, knowing that a misstep could send them tumbling into the ditch below. At night, torches will flicker against the rough stone, casting long shadows over the courtyard. The contrast between light and dark will create illusions, making the castle appear stronger than it is. Even incomplete, the psychological impact is considerable. You climb a narrow staircase, your hands gripping the wooden railing, and pause to take in the view. From this height, the surrounding fields and villages stretch out like a patchwork quilt. The Motte and Bailey, behind you, seems almost insignificant compared to the rising stone keep. Yet every step of this transformation, mud to wood, wood to stone, reflects centuries of trial, error, and adaptation. You notice a small, unexpected detail, a pigeon perched on a half-built parapet, cooing quietly, unbothered by the chaos below. It reminds you that while humans labor and strategize, life continues in all its stubborn resilience. Even in the midst of construction, small creatures claim their spaces, indifferent to human ambition. As dusk falls, shadows lengthen, and the temperature drops. Workers pause to wipe sweat and soot from their faces, while guards glance warily toward the tree line where potential threats may lurk. The hybrid wooden and stone structure stands, incomplete but proud, an emblem of medieval ingenuity and perseverance. This is the first real step toward the stone castles that will define the coming centuries. You step back from the half-built stone keep and notice the evolution of design, taking shape before your eyes. Simple square walls begin to rise, imposing and rough, standing in stark contrast to the soft curves of the motte beneath. The builders are experimenting, learning which angles resist battering rams best, which heights allow for better visibility, and how thick walls must be to survive fire and siege. Every stone laid carries the weight of experience and centuries of trial and error. The courtyard buzzes with life. Peasants carry stones, mortar, and timber across slippery paths, occasionally slipping and earning a sharp rebuke from overseers. Women fetch water from a nearby stream to mix with mortar or cook over open fires. Children run errands, dodging livestock that roam freely, from pigs to goats to clucking chickens. The mix of construction and daily chores gives the castle an odd, chaotic rhythm, like a living organism trying to grow faster than nature allows. A mainstream historical fact hovers in your mind: square keeps, while easier to build, had a notable weakness. Their corners were susceptible to undermining or battering, which later inspired the transition to round towers in the 12th century. But for now, these square structures dominate the landscape, asserting the Lord's presence with unmistakable authority. You can see the logic, imposing, functional, and a visual statement of power. Oddly, the Lord's Hall, still a drafty wooden structure within the stone shell, often smells of cooking smoke, unwashed bodies, and animal dung. It's a contrast to the intimidating exterior, a reminder that medieval life combined grandeur with grim practicality. You peer inside a half-finished hall and see a table covered with crude bread, dried meat, and a few unwashed vegetables, the staples of even the nobility. Power is impressive from the outside, but survival dictates the inside. Scholars still argue whether the first stone keeps were primarily defensive or symbolic. Some insist they were built to impress and intimidate more than to withstand attacks. Others point to the rising walls, arrow slits, and thickened corners as proof of genuine military intent. You lean against a rough-hewn wall and consider both possibilities, realizing that in medieval construction, function and prestige often intertwined. The moat surrounding this evolving castle is deeper now, though still uneven in width. Water pools in certain spots, stagnant in others, providing an imperfect but effective barrier. Frogs leap from mud to stone, and dragonflies hover over the murky water, indifferent to the human anxieties above. The ditch and walls together form the first line of defense, a combination of natural and man-made obstacles. Inside the bailey, daily routines continue. A blacksmith hammers iron fittings, sparks flying against rough timber and stone. Children fetch more water while dogs and chickens weave between their legs. Women stir thick soups, and the aroma mixes with the earthy scent of wet stone. Life is relentless but strangely rhythmic, each task a note in the ongoing symphony of survival. You climb a scaffold to reach the upper walls, gripping ropes and rough planks carefully. The higher you go, the more you see the labor of generations. Attempts to balance speed with stability, to combine defense with livability. You pause, feeling the weight of each stone under your fingers, understanding the care and effort invested in something that will outlast the people who build it. Guards patrol along temporary wooden walkways, checking for weaknesses and keeping watch over the surrounding land. From this vantage, you notice distant fields and villages, small and vulnerable, and you realize why early castles were as much psychological tools as defensive ones. They project power, control, and authority across the landscape, making peasants obey and rivals hesitate. A small oddity catches your attention. A squirrel darts across a wall, seemingly unconcerned with the construction chaos around it. Nature persists, continuing its indifferent routines, even as humans erect symbols of permanence and dominance. The juxtaposition is stark and quietly humbling. As twilight falls, shadows stretch across the stone walls and wooden scaffolding. Fires glow warmly in the courtyard below, casting flickering light on tired faces. The hybrid structure, part wood, part stone, is a testament to ingenuity, adaptation, and the medieval obsession with both survival and status. Here, the first real steps toward the imposing castles of later centuries unfold, quietly and laboriously, in mud, sweat, and stone. You walk along the outer perimeter of the castle and notice subtle changes. The wooden palisades, once frail and uneven, have been reinforced with earthworks and stone foundations. Each corner now rises with a careful intention, not haphazardly thrown together. The moat beneath still shows its earthen origins, but the combination of wood, earth, and stone gives a sense of permanence and slow evolution. The castle is no longer just a defensive mound. It is a statement of power, carved directly into the landscape. Inside the bailey, life pulses with relentless energy. Women tend to boiling cauldrons, the thick steam curling into the damp air, while children dash between work sites, clutching small bundles of firewood or fetching water. Peasants haul stones up temporary ramps, slipping in mud, only to be scolded by overseers with rough voices. The air smells of wet earth, smoke, sweat, and livestock, a medley that is both suffocating and oddly grounding. You take a deep breath, letting the sensory chaos embed you fully in this medieval world. A mainstream historical fact reminds you of the broader picture. As the 11th century progresses, the motte and bailey design spreads widely throughout Europe, from Normandy to England and into the Germanic lands. Lords adapted the design to suit the terrain, climate, and local threats. Hills became natural advantages. Rivers were incorporated into moats, and timber was replaced gradually by stone for longevity and prestige. You can almost hear the echoes of this spread, a quiet revolution of fortification taking shape across the continent. Oddly, some lords added gardens or small orchards within the bailey, not for luxury, but for practical reasons. Fruit, herbs, and vegetables were scarce, and every calorie counted. You imagine stepping carefully through the muddy paths to gather apples, while guards patrol, each fruit a precious resource amidst the chaos. Even in these early fortifications, life demanded a mix of defense and sustenance. Scholars still argue whether the addition of stone to keeps was purely for defense or largely for social signaling. Some insist the impressive height and bulk were intended to awe neighboring lords and peasants alike. Others emphasized the practical defensive advantages, thicker walls, arrow slits, and stronger foundations that could withstand battering rams. You climb a slope, alongside a partially built wall, and reflect on how perception and practicality intertwine in every medieval decision. The moat now holds more water than before, thanks to recent rainfall, and the reflection of the half-built stone keeps shimmers in its murky depths. Frogs leap, insects skitter across the surface, and occasional ducks paddle leisurely. The juxtaposition of animal life with human industry is stark. Nature continues, indifferent to the labor and ambition surrounding it. Inside the bailey, daily routines continue with stubborn persistence. A blacksmith hammers metal into hinges and brackets, sparks scattering into the muddy ground. Children fetch water from small streams, careful to avoid slipping into puddles. Women stir thick stews, adding a handful of grain or beans as they go. The sounds of work, laughter, and animal noises create a constant, almost hypnotic rhythm. You realize this daily life is as integral to the castle as its walls. Guards patrol the parapets and makeshift walkways, their eyes sharp for movement in the surrounding woods. The higher you climb, the more commanding the view. Fields, villages, and forests stretching toward the horizon. You understand why early castles were as much psychological tools as defensive structures. The height communicates authority. The visibility ensures surveillance and control. An unexpected detail captures your attention. A small cat perched on a ledge, watching the goings-on with calm detachment. Even in the midst of chaos, life adapts. The castle is a human endeavor, yes, but the world around it persists on its own rhythm. A constant reminder that medieval life was never solely about humans. As night falls, torches glow faintly, casting long shadows across timber scaffolding and rough stone walls. The Mott and Bailey hybrid is now a complex organism of wood, earth, and stone. Every plank, every stone, every hand-carved notch contributes to its identity. You sit quietly atop the slope, feeling the weight of history pressing down, not in lectures or books, but in the very mud and timber beneath your hands. You move toward a section of the castle where the stone walls rise higher, almost daring the sky to challenge them. The stones are rough, irregular, and still bear the marks of chisels and hammers. Mortar clings between them, wet and glistening from recent rain. You realize that every block has been moved painstakingly, hauled by human strength alone, each one a testament to the labor of countless hands. The castle is no longer just a fort. It's a statement of determination, persistence, and ambition. Inside the Bailey, life continues in relentless rhythm. Peasants haul stones up ramps that creak under the weight, occasionally slipping in the mud. Women stir thick stews over open fires, the aroma mixing with the earthy scent of wet stone and wood smoke. Children dart between adults, carrying water or small bundles of firewood. Pigs snort as they squeeze past, chickens flutter, and a stray dog barks nervously at the chaos. You notice the strange balance between order and disorder. Life continues even amidst construction and constant vigilance. A mainstream historical fact presses into your awareness. By the late 11th century, the transition from wood to stone in castle construction was largely complete in many regions. Lords recognized that timber could not endure centuries of weather, fire, or siege. Stone offered permanence, a visible and lasting symbol of power and security. You run your fingers over the rough stone wall and imagine the countless hands that positioned each block, shaping not just a building, but a legacy. Oddly, you notice a small corner where the mason has carved a crude animal figure into the stone, a cat, perhaps, or a goat. It seems whimsical, almost childlike, an odd contrast to the seriousness of the fortification. Such small carvings were rare, but they remind you that human touches and quirks often survive in the shadows of history. Scholars still argue whether these early stone keeps were meant primarily for defense or for demonstrating status. Some insist that the height, bulk, and fortifications were a show of strength, intimidating neighbors and peasants alike. Others emphasize the functional benefits: thicker walls, better vantage points, and a foundation strong enough to endure battering rams and fire. You step back to view the structure from a distance, seeing both aspects interwoven: function and prestige, inseparable in medieval construction. The moat surrounding this section has deepened further, filled now with rainwater that reflects the towering walls above. Frogs leap, insects skitter, and a few ducks paddle lazily across the surface. Nature continues its indifferent rhythm even as humans strive for dominance. You watch a frog leap onto a stone ledge and pause, marveling at how life adapts around human endeavor. Inside the Bailey, the daily rhythm of labor persists. Blacksmiths hammer iron fittings, sparks flying into the damp air. Children carry water while dodging livestock. Women stir thick porridge, adding grains or beans as they go. The soundscape is a mix of work animal noises, laughter, and occasional shouts of reprimand from overseers. The energy is chaotic yet hypnotic, forming the heartbeat of the castle itself. Guards patrol the walkways along the newly built walls, scanning the distant fields and forests. You climb one of the scaffolds, gripping the wet planks, and take in the view. Villages, roads, and forests stretch to the horizon. The castle's elevation asserts authority over the surrounding land, a visual proclamation of dominance. It's psychological as much as practical, a constant reminder of who controls the space. A minor, amusing detail catches your eye. A small bird has nested in a crevice of the stone wall, unbothered by human activity. Even as labor continues, life thrives in unexpected ways. The contrast between the human struggle for permanence and the resilience of nature is striking. As dusk falls, torches flicker along the walls and scaffolds, casting dancing shadows. The modern Bailey, now part stone, part wood, and part earth, seems to hum with the energy of human effort. Every stone, plank, and heap of earth contributes to its identity. You pause atop the mod, letting the weight of history settle around you. Here, in mud, stone, and sweat, the foundations of future medieval castles are quietly, painstakingly laid. Section 8. You wander toward the castle's outer walls, where the first defensive towers are beginning to rise. The stones are stacked unevenly, and scaffolding leans precariously against the rough surface. Workers balance on narrow planks, hauling mortar and stone upward. Each block seems alive with purpose, yet teeters on the edge of collapse. You feel the tension in the air. The possibility of accident is constant, but the rhythm of labor continues unabated. The courtyard hums with activity. Women knead dough in large wooden bowls, while children scurry about with buckets of water or firewood. Peasants drag stones along muddy paths, slipping occasionally and receiving harsh words from overseers. Goats and pigs move between the legs of workers, occasionally startling them. A blacksmith hammers metal fittings in a corner, sparks flying like miniature fireworks into the damp air. The scent of wet stone, smoke, and unwashed bodies mingles in a strange, earthy perfume. A mainstream historical fact emerges in your mind. Early medieval castles often had corner towers for improved defense and visibility. These round or square towers allowed defenders to fire upon attackers while reducing blind spots. You notice the walls beginning to curve slightly in some sections, a hint of adaptation and experimentation. Every shape, every decision is influenced by both practicality and the desire to project power. Oddly, a small cat weaves between the feet of laborers, seemingly unbothered by the noise and chaos. Animals in medieval castles often had dual purposes: companionship and pest control. You imagine this cat as both a silent observer and a tiny, efficient exterminator of mice and rats, surviving alongside humans in this chaotic ecosystem. Scholars still debate whether these early towers were primarily functional or symbolic. Some argue that the imposing height and bulk served as deterrents, while others claim they primarily broadcasted status and dominance to neighbors and visiting lords. You walk along a damp ledge, feeling the rough stone under your fingertips, recognizing that both interpretations likely coexist. The moat below, filled unevenly with rainwater, reflects the growing towers above. Frogs leap, dragonflies skim the surface, and the occasional duck paddles across the murky water. The juxtaposition of human ambition and natural persistence strikes you. Life continues, indifferent to fortifications and power struggles. Inside the bailey, the daily rhythm remains relentless. Children fetch water, women stir soups or tend fires. Peasants carry heavy loads, and guards patrol. The mixture of labor, noise, and animal activity forms a constant, hypnotic backdrop. You pause to watch a child balance a bucket of water, almost spilling, and you realize that survival is a delicate balance, both in construction and life. From the top of a partially built tower, you survey the landscape. Fields, forests, and distant villages stretch in every direction. The castle dominates the horizon, a physical and psychological barrier. It's not just a defensive structure, it asserts control over space and people, demanding respect and obedience. A small, whimsical detail catches your attention. A mason has carved an abstract face into one of the stones. Peeking out from the rough texture, these minor touches humanize the imposing architecture, reminding you that even amid labor and authority, creativity and playfulness endure. As night falls, torches flicker along the scaffolding, casting long, dancing shadows across the stone and mud. The castle hums with energy, the interplay of human labor, ambition, and survival. You sit quietly atop the scaffolds, feeling the weight of history in the rough stones, in the sweat of workers, and in the persistent rhythm of medieval life. Here, at the edge of order and chaos, the foundations of enduring castles continue to rise. You approach the newest section of the castle, where construction has shifted from simple walls to more elaborate defensive structures. Narrow arrow slits are being carved into thick stone walls, allowing defenders to see and strike without exposing themselves. Scaffolding creaks under the weight of masons, each step deliberate, each movement careful. The work is painstaking, slow, yet purposeful, a dance of precision amidst chaos. The courtyard below is alive with activity. Children run errands, carrying water or bundles of firewood. Women tend boiling cauldrons, stirring thick stews while watching livestock wander freely. Peasants haul stones up ramps, slipping occasionally in mud, their hands and faces streaked with sweat and grime. The smell of wet stone, smoke, and cooking fills the air, a raw, visceral reminder of the labor-intensive life in early medieval castles. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. By the 12th century, castles began to incorporate concentric defenses, with multiple layers of walls and ditches. This evolution made breaching a castle increasingly difficult and reflected the growing sophistication of siege warfare. You can see the beginnings of this strategy in the staggered walls and partially constructed towers. Frogs leap, dragonflies skim the surface, and the occasional duck paddles across the murky water. The juxtaposition of human ambition and natural persistence strikes you. Life continues, indifferent to fortifications and power struggles. Inside the bailey, the daily rhythm remains relentless. Children fetch water, women stir soups or tend fires. Peasants carry heavy loads, and guards patrol. The mixture of labor, noise, and animal activity forms a constant, hypnotic backdrop. You pause to watch a child balance a bucket of water, almost spilling, and you realize that survival is a delicate balance, both in construction and life. From the top of a partially built tower, you survey the landscape. Fields, forests, and distant villages stretch in every direction. The castle dominates the horizon, a physical and psychological barrier. It's not just a defensive structure, it asserts control over space and people, demanding respect and obedience. A small, whimsical detail catches your attention. A mason has carved an abstract face into one of the stones. Peeking out from the rough texture, these minor touches humanize the imposing architecture, reminding you that even amid labor and authority, creativity and playfulness endure. As night falls, torches flicker along the scaffolding, casting long, dancing shadows across the stone and mud. The castle hums with energy, the interplay of human labor, ambition, and survival. You sit quietly atop the scaffolds, feeling the weight of history in the rough stones, in the sweat of workers, and in the persistent rhythm of medieval life. Here, at the edge of order and chaos, the foundations of enduring castles continue to rise. You walk along the outer wall where the first fully stone towers are taking shape. The rough-hewn blocks are larger now, carefully positioned to create stronger, more imposing structures. Scaffolding leans against the walls, workers balancing precariously as they haul stones and mortar upward. The air is thick with dust, the smell of wet stone, and the faint tang of iron from blacksmiths hammering fittings nearby. Every movement is deliberate, a combination of strength, skill, and nerve. Inside the bailey, the rhythm of daily life continues unabated. Women stir thick stews over smoky fires, the aroma mingling with mud and the scent of livestock. Children scurry, carrying water or small bundles of firewood, occasionally tripping over uneven ground. Peasants drag heavy stones along muddy paths, their hands raw and faces streaked with sweat. You notice the constant balance between order and chaos, every task interconnected, every misstep potentially costly. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. By the 12th century, round towers began replacing square ones because they better deflected projectiles and eliminated vulnerable corners. You observe the partially built round tower at the corner, imagining the strategic advantage it will provide once complete. Every curve, every layer of stone, reflects centuries of evolving military architecture and practical innovation. Oddly, you spot a tiny carving in the stonework, a small frog perched atop a block, painstakingly etched by one of the masons. It seems out of place amidst the grim work, a whimsical signature amidst the seriousness of construction. You smile at the thought of this small, hidden detail surviving centuries, unnoticed yet enduring. Scholars still debate the extent to which early castles were designed for prestige versus practicality. Some argue that imposing height and formidable walls served mainly to intimidate rivals and subjects, while others insist defensive features like arrow slits and thicker walls prove their primary military function. Standing here, you can see that both interpretations coexist. The castle asserts power physically and psychologically. The moat surrounding the walls has collected more rainwater, reflecting the flickering torches and the silhouette of scaffolding. Frogs leap into the water, dragonflies skim the surface, and ducks paddle lazily. Life persists around human endeavor, indifferent yet intertwined with medieval labor. Inside the bailey, daily routines carry on with stubborn consistency. Blacksmiths hammer iron brackets and hinges, sparks flying into the damp air. Children ferry water while avoiding livestock. Women stir thick soups and bake bread over open fires. The sounds of work, animal calls, and occasional shouts of reprimand blend into a rhythmic hum, the heartbeat of the castle itself. From the top of the round tower, the surrounding lands stretch in every direction. Fields, forests, and villages dip the horizon. The castle dominates the landscape, a constant reminder of authority and control. Its presence communicates power, surveillance, and security simultaneously, a psychological as well as practical statement. A small, amusing detail draws your attention. A cat perches on a ledge, watching the bustle below with serene detachment. Even in the chaos of human ambition, life adapts, persists, and thrives. The castle is a human enterprise, yet it exists within a world that continues on its own rhythm. As night falls, torches illuminate the walls and scaffolding, casting long shadows across stone and mud. The hybrid structure, part stone, part wood, part earth, hums with energy. Every stone, plank, and heap of earth contributes to its growing identity. You pause atop the tower, feeling the weight of history, labor, and ambition. Here, amidst sweat, dust, and determination, the foundations of enduring medieval fortresses continue to rise, quietly asserting their presence over the centuries to come. You stroll along the castle's inner bailey, observing the first signs of permanent stone walls, beginning to define the courtyard. Timber scaffolds still dominate the landscape, but now you can see the ambition behind the labor: thicker walls, taller towers, and careful placement of arrow slits and battlements. Every mason and laborer moves with a mix of urgency and precision, knowing that each stone contributes to the castle's enduring strength. Life inside the bailey hums steadily. Women tend fires, stirring thick stews or baking bread over open flames. Children dash between adults, carrying water or small bundles of wood, their bare feet muddied and slippery. Peasants haul stones along muddy paths, occasionally slipping and eliciting sharp reprimands from overseers. The smell of wet stone, smoke, and unwashed bodies mingles with the faint scent of livestock, pigs, goats, and chickens wandering freely, adding chaos and authenticity to the scene. A mainstream historical fact settles in your mind. By the mid-12th century, castles increasingly incorporated concentric designs, with multiple layers of walls and ditches to enhance defense. The outer walls absorb initial attacks, while the inner keeps provide a final sanctuary. You notice early hints of this strategy in the staggered walls and partial towers you pass, imagining how a siege might unfold centuries later. Oddly, a mason has etched a small, smiling face into one of the blocks, a secret signature perhaps, a humanizing touch amidst the weighty seriousness of construction. These tiny details survive across centuries, unnoticed yet enduring, reminders of the individuals behind the monumental efforts. Scholars still debate the balance of symbolism and function in castle design. Were these structures primarily meant to defend, or were they intended to awe and intimidate? You glance at the tall, imposing walls against the sky and realize the answer likely lies somewhere in between. Castles communicate authority while also providing genuine defense. The moat glistens under the midday sun, its murky waters disturbed by frogs and insects. A few ducks paddle lazily, indifferent to the humans laboring above. Nature persists, a constant companion to human endeavor, blending into the rhythm of castle life. Within the bailey, the flow of daily life continues unabated. Blacksmiths hammer iron fittings, sparks flying across wet wood and stone. Children fetch water, weaving carefully around livestock. Women stir thick soups and tend fires, their hands blackened with soot and grime. The combined soundscape of work, animal noises, and shouted commands creates a chaotic yet oddly hypnotic backdrop. From a scaffold near the top of a tower, you look across the surrounding countryside. Fields, villages, forests, and distant hills stretching toward the horizon. The castle's height commands the landscape, a visual assertion of control and authority. You understand why medieval lords valued elevation, visibility, and psychological impact were as vital as structural strength. A small, charming detail catches your eye: a cat perched on a ledge, observing the bustle below. Life persists alongside human labor, indifferent yet intricately woven into the castle's ecosystem. Even in the midst of construction chaos, nature continues its rhythm. As twilight descends, torches glow faintly along the walls and scaffolds, casting long shadows that stretch across stone, wood, and mud. The castle, a hybrid of earth, timber, and stone, hums with latent energy, the culmination of labor, ambition, and survival. You rest briefly atop a wall, feeling the weight of history, human effort, and ingenuity pressing down. Here, the foundations of enduring medieval fortresses are slowly, deliberately, and painstakingly laid. You follow a narrow path along the castle walls, now partially lined with newly placed stone. The towers are taller, stronger, and more imposing, their silhouettes cutting sharply against the sky. Scaffolding remains, but the structure beneath is transforming from a temporary construction into a permanent fortress. Every stone you touch feels weighty, not just in mass, but in history, as if it carries centuries of human ambition and sweat. Inside the bailey, activity continues with relentless rhythm. Women stir heavy cauldrons, baking bread, and tending fires while chatting softly. Children dash across the muddy ground with small bundles of wood or water, occasionally tripping but laughing as they scramble upright. Peasants haul stones along sloped paths, slipping occasionally, earning sharp words from overseers. The combined scent of wet stone, smoke, and livestock forms a thick, earthy perfume that clings to your senses. A mainstream historical fact grounds your wandering thoughts. By the 12th century, many castles had begun to include gatehouses with fortified entrances and drawbridges. These features controlled access, funneled attackers into vulnerable zones, and signaled authority. You notice the early stages of such a gate, timber supports and stone foundations beginning to form a defensive choke point. Oddly, someone has left tiny carvings in the stone near the gate. A bird, a tiny dog, and even a crude smiley face. These minute touches are more than whimsical. They are glimpses into the humanity of the laborers, traces of individuals asserting themselves in a monumental project. You pause to study them, realizing how history often preserves small, overlooked details alongside grand achievements. Scholars still debate the balance between practicality and symbolism in castles. Some argue their purpose was largely defensive. Others insist their height, bulk, and fortifications primarily broadcasted authority. Standing here, you can feel both elements, protection and projection of power merging seamlessly. The moat beyond the walls glimmers faintly under the late afternoon sun. Frogs leap into the water, dragonflies skim across the surface, and ducks paddle lazily. Life continues, indifferent to human ambition, yet fully integrated into the castle's ecosystem. You pause, letting the quiet, persistence of nature balance the ceaseless human activity around you. Within the bailey, the rhythm of work persists. Blacksmiths hammer iron fittings, sparks scattering into the damp air. Children fetch water and navigate around animals. Women stir thick soups and bake bread over fires. The mix of noise, hammering, laughter, animal calls, and shouted commands creates a chaotic but steady heartbeat of medieval life. From a higher vantage point, you scan the surrounding lands. Forests, fields, and distant villages stretch toward the horizon. The castle dominates the landscape, asserting authority and control. Its presence is as much psychological as it is practical. A reminder of power to those near and far. A minor, amusing detail draws your attention. A small cat climbs a wall, perched on a ledge as if surveying the entire courtyard. Even amid human labor, life adapts and persists in its own rhythm. The castle is a human enterprise, yet it exists within a living, breathing world that continues independently. As dusk falls, torches glow along scaffolds and walls, casting flickering shadows across stone, timber, and mud. The castle, a mix of earth, wood, and stone, hums with quiet energy, the culmination of ambition, labor, and survival. You lean against a partially built wall, feeling the weight of history pressing down. Here, amidst mud, sweat, and determination, the foundations of enduring medieval fortresses continue their slow, deliberate rise. You tread along the inner walls where the first signs of permanent defensive structures are taking shape. Arrow slits pierce the thick stone, their narrow openings promising protection while allowing defenders to strike. Scaffolding leans precariously against the walls, with workers hauling mortar and stone, moving deliberately to avoid accidents. The air smells of wet stone, smoke, and the faint tang of iron from blacksmiths working nearby, a mixture that hits your senses with both discomfort and fascination. The bailey pulses with life. Women stir heavy cauldrons of stew over open flames, kneading dough in large wooden bowls. Children scuttle about, carrying water or small firewood bundles, their feet caked in mud. Peasants drag heavy stones up ramps, their muscles straining, faces streaked with sweat and grime. Animals wander freely. Pigs snort, goats bleat, chickens cluck, intertwining chaos and survival in a delicate rhythm. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. By the mid-12th century, concentric castles with multiple layers of walls and ditches became more common. These layered fortifications offered increased defense, forcing attackers to breach multiple obstacles before reaching the central keep. You note the beginnings of this design in the staggered walls and partially built towers, realizing the careful planning behind each layer. Oddly, a mason has etched a tiny dragon into the corner of a stone block, its form playful and intricate. Such hidden carvings offer a glimpse into the personal touches of workers, small acts of expression amid the monumental labor. You pause to admire this miniature artistry, imagining the pride and humor that persisted even in harsh conditions. Scholars still argue whether the primary function of castles was defense or dominance. Were these imposing stone structures designed to withstand sieges, or did they primarily broadcast authority and wealth? Standing here, you feel both purposes intertwined. The castle asserts power while providing tangible security. The moat glistens under the late afternoon light, reflecting flickering torches and scaffolding silhouettes. Frogs leap and dragonflies skim the surface, while ducks paddle lazily. Nature persists around human effort, indifferent yet entwined with the rhythm of medieval life. Within the bailey, daily routines continue. Blacksmiths hammer iron fittings, sparks flying into the damp air. Children navigate carefully among animals while fetching water. Women stir soups and tend fires, hands blackened by soot. The combination of labor, laughter, animal sounds, and shouted commands creates a chaotic but hypnotic rhythm, the heartbeat of the castle itself. From a high scaffold, you survey the surrounding lands. Fields, forests, and distant villages stretch toward the horizon. The castle dominates the view, a constant assertion of authority. Its height and position are as psychological as they are defensive, projecting control to all who see it. A small, whimsical detail captures your eye. A cat perches silently on a wall, observing the bustling courtyard below. Even amid labor and construction, life adapts, persists, and thrives. The castle may be a human enterprise, but it exists within a living, breathing world. As night falls, torches along the scaffolds cast flickering shadows on stone, timber, and mud. The castle hums with latent energy, the culmination of labor, ambition, and daily survival. You lean against the wall, feeling the weight of history and human effort pressing down. Here, in mud, sweat, and stone, the foundations of enduring medieval fortresses continue to rise, slowly asserting themselves over time. You move toward the castle's newly fortified gatehouse, where timber and stone merge to form a defensive choke point. Workers lift heavy beams into place while others carefully position stones. For the archway, the smell of wet mortar mixes with smoke from nearby fires and the pungent scent of livestock wandering the courtyard. Every motion is deliberate. A single misstep could send stones crashing into the muddy ground below. The bailey remains a hive of activity. Women stir thick stews, knead dough, and tend fires, their hands darkened by soot and flour. Children scurry along uneven paths, balancing buckets of water or bundles of firewood. Peasants drag heavy stones and timber up ramps, muscles straining under the weight. Pigs grunt, goats bleat, and chickens dart between workers' legs. A chaotic soundtrack that underscores daily survival. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. By the 12th and 13th centuries, gatehouses often included portcullises, drawbridges, and murder holes, allowing defenders to control entry points effectively. You can see the early stages of such a structure here, with timber supports ready for a heavy gate and stonework forming defensive niches. Every detail reflects careful thought, not just about defense, but also about deterrence. Oddly, a mason has carved a tiny cat into a stone block near the gate, its form playful and almost hidden. These little artistic flourishes are traces of humanity amidst the relentless labor, tiny signatures that survive unnoticed through the centuries. You wonder if future generations will stumble upon them and smile. At this small touch of levity, scholars still debate whether castles were designed more for practical defense or psychological dominance. The gatehouse exemplifies this tension. Its heavy timber and stone communicate power and control, while its functional design ensures genuine protection. Both purposes coexist seamlessly. The moat outside shimmers under the afternoon sun. Frogs leap into the water, dragonflies skim the surface, and ducks paddle lazily. Nature persists alongside human labor, indifferent yet fully integrated into the rhythm of castle life. Inside the bailey, the flow of work continues. Blacksmiths hammer iron fittings, sparks flying into the damp air. Children navigate carefully around livestock while carrying water. Women stir thick soups and bake bread over open flames. The combination of sounds, hammering, laughter, animal calls, and shouted orders, creates a chaotic but hypnotic symphony. From a scaffold atop the gatehouse, you survey the surrounding countryside. Forests, fields, and distant villages stretch to the horizon. The castle dominates the landscape, asserting authority and control. Its height is as much a statement to onlookers as it is a strategic vantage point. A whimsical detail captures your attention. A small squirrel scurries along the wall, oblivious to the human activity below. Even in the chaos of construction, life adapts and persists. The castle is a human endeavor, yet it exists within a living ecosystem that continues independently. As twilight falls, torches ignite along scaffolds and walls, casting flickering shadows across stone, timber, and mud. The hybrid structure hums with latent energy, the product of labor, ambition, and survival. You lean against a partially built wall, feeling the weight of history pressing down. Here, amidst sweat, mud, and stone, the foundations of enduring medieval fortresses continue their deliberate, patient rise. You wander through the inner bailey, where the walls have grown taller and more imposing. The first defensive towers are nearly complete, their arrow slits narrow and precise. Workers balance precariously on scaffolding, hauling stones and mortar while shouting instructions to one another. The scent of wet stone, smoke from fires, and the faint tang of iron from blacksmiths fills your senses. Every movement is calculated, each stone placed with intent, a testament to centuries of evolving medieval construction techniques. The courtyard pulses with life. Women stir cauldrons of thick stew over open flames, knead dough, and tend small fires. Children dash along muddy paths, carrying water or bundles of wood, their laughter and occasional falls blending into the background noise. Peasants drag heavy stones and timber, muscles straining, faces streaked with sweat. Livestock, pigs, goats, chickens, wander freely, creating both chaos and companionship within the bailey. A mainstream historical fact grounds your observations. By the 13th century, castles increasingly featured concentric defenses, multiple walls that forced attackers into layered zones of vulnerability. You notice the beginnings of this strategy as walls of varying heights curve around the inner keep. Each layer is both functional and intimidating, a silent message to any approaching enemy. Oddly, you spot a tiny carved face hidden in the stone near a doorway, a mason's playful signature. Such personal touches, small as they are, provide glimpses into the humanity behind the massive labor. Tiny rebellions of creativity amid relentless construction. You pause, appreciating how even in grueling work, humans leave traces of personality. Scholars still argue whether these structures primarily communicated defense or dominance. The imposing walls served both purposes, a practical barrier to attackers and a psychological assertion of power to subjects and rivals. You can feel the dual intention in every block and curve of stone. The moat reflects the waning afternoon light, rippling as frogs leap and dragonflies skim the surface. Ducks paddle lazily, indifferent to the human activity above. Nature persists alongside human enterprise, maintaining its rhythm amid labor and ambition. Within the bailey, the daily routine continues. Blacksmiths hammer iron fittings, sparks flying into the damp air. Children navigate carefully among animals while delivering water. Women stir soups and bake bread over open flames. The combined sounds, hammering, chatter, animal calls, and occasional shouts, form a hypnotic rhythm, the heartbeat of the castle itself. From a scaffold atop one of the towers, you scan the surrounding landscape. Fields, forests, and distant villages stretch to the horizon. The castle dominates the terrain, asserting authority both visually and strategically. Its presence communicates power, security, and surveillance simultaneously. A small, whimsical detail draws your attention. A cat perches on a ledge, calmly observing the bustle below. Even amid the chaos of human activity, life adapts and persists. The castle exists not in isolation, but within a living ecosystem that moves around it. As dusk settles, torches flicker along walls and scaffolds, casting dancing shadows across stone and mud. The castle, part stone, part timber, part earth, hums with quiet energy, the culmination of labor, ambition, and survival. You lean against the partially built wall, feeling the weight of history pressing down. Here, amidst sweat, dust, and determination, the foundations of enduring medieval fortresses continue their slow, deliberate rise. You stroll along the perimeter of the castle where the first full round. Towers have begun to rise. The stone is rough but strong, each block meticulously placed to form an unyielding barrier. Scaffolding leans against the walls, creaking softly as workers move stones and mortar upward. The air is thick with dust, smoke from fires, and the tang of iron, mingling into a raw, earthy aroma. Every movement seems deliberate, a choreographed effort to create something meant to endure for centuries. Inside the Bailey, life continues in an organized chaos. Women tend to cauldrons of stew, knead dough, and stoke fires, their hands blackened by soot and flour. Children dart through muddy paths, carrying water or bundles of wood, occasionally tripping but quickly scrambling upright with laughter. Peasants haul heavy stones, muscles straining, faces streaked with sweat. Livestock wander freely, pigs grunt, goats bleat, and chickens scuttle, creating both noise and vitality within the courtyard. A mainstream historical fact arises. By the late 12th century, round towers replaced square ones because they better deflected projectiles and eliminated weak corners. You can already see this advantage forming as the curvature of the newly built tower promises strength and resilience against siege engines. The architecture is as strategic as it is imposing. Oddly, one mason has carved a small bird into the corner of a block. This tiny artistic flourish seems out of place among functional stones, but reminds you of the human presence behind the construction. It is a small, enduring signature that will outlast the builder who etched it. Scholars still debate whether castles prioritize psychological dominance or pure defense. Standing beneath the towering walls, you realize both purposes coexist seamlessly. The imposing height asserts authority, while strategic placement and design serve genuine defensive functions. The moat below shimmers in the sunlight, disturbed occasionally by frogs and dragonflies. Ducks paddle lazily along the murky water, indifferent to the human toil above. Nature persists alongside construction, a constant yet quiet presence integrated into the rhythm of medieval life. Within the Bailey, daily labor continues. Blacksmiths hammer iron fittings, sparks flying into the damp air. Children dodge animals while fetching water. Women stir soups, bake bread, and tend fires. The chaotic symphony of labor, animal calls, and chatter forms a hypnotic rhythm, a heartbeat of the castle itself. From the upper scaffolds, you survey the surrounding countryside. Forests, fields, and distant villages stretch toward the horizon. The castle dominates the view, asserting authority and providing a strategic vantage point. Its presence communicates power, protection, and surveillance simultaneously. A whimsical detail captures your attention. A small cat sits perched on a ledge, watching the bustle below with calm detachment. Even amid human activity, life adapts and persists. The castle, a human creation, exists within a living, breathing ecosystem that continues independently. As night falls, torches ignite along walls and scaffolds, casting flickering shadows across stone, timber, and mud. The castle hums with latent energy, a testament to labor, ambition, and survival. Leaning against a partially built wall, you feel the weight of history pressing down. Amid sweat, dust, and stone, the foundations of enduring medieval fortresses continue their deliberate, patient rise. You wander toward the castle's inner walls, where construction has shifted from basic structure to detail and reinforcement. Arrow slits, narrow and deliberate, now punctuate the thick stone, promising both protection and offensive capability. Scaffolding clatters as workers haul mortar and stones upward, moving with careful precision. The scent of wet stone mingles with smoke from fires and the metallic tang of iron, creating an atmosphere dense with labor and human effort. Inside the Bailey, life hums along its chaotic rhythm. Women tend heavy cauldrons of stew, knead dough in large wooden bowls, and stoke fires, hands blackened with soot. Children dash along muddy paths carrying water or bundles of firewood. occasionally slipping but recovering with laughter. Peasants drag stones and timber, muscles straining, faces streaked with grime and sweat. Livestock, pigs, goats, and chickens wander freely, adding a layer of unpredictability to the busy courtyard. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. By the 13th century, concentric castles with multiple layers of walls became more standard, offering layered defenses and forcing attackers into increasingly vulnerable zones. You notice early signs of this design in the staggered walls and partially built inner towers, imagining how an invader would struggle to breach such fortifications. Oddly, a mason has etched a tiny frog into the corner of a stone block, a playful signature hidden in plain sight. These little touches reveal the human presence behind monumental labor, small acts of personality surviving across centuries. You pause, appreciating how even in hard work, humans insert moments of whimsy. Scholars still debate whether castles primarily serve to defend or to impress. Standing here, you can feel both functions at once. The thick walls provide security, while their sheer height and imposing silhouette broadcast authority and control. The moat glistens in the afternoon light, disturbed by frogs leaping in and dragonflies skimming the surface. Ducks paddle lazily, indifferent to the human bustle above. Nature persists, integrated yet independent, a quiet companion to the ceaseless human activity. Within the bailey, daily labor continues unabated. Blacksmiths hammer iron fittings, sparks flying into the damp air. Children navigate among animals while carrying water. Women stir soups, bake bread, and tend fires, their combined efforts forming a chaotic but steady rhythm. The heartbeat of the castle. From a high scaffolding point, you survey the surrounding landscape. Fields, forests, and distant villages stretch toward the horizon. The castle dominates the terrain, asserting authority both visually and strategically. Its presence communicates power, security, and surveillance simultaneously. A small, amusing detail draws your attention. A cat sits perched on a ledge, observing the courtyard with serene detachment. Even amid chaos, life persists. The castle exists not in isolation, but within a living, breathing world. As dusk descends, torches illuminate walls and scaffolds, casting long, dancing shadows across stone, timber, and mud. The castle hums with latent energy, a product of labor, ambition, and survival. Leaning against a partially built wall, you feel the weight of history pressing down. Here, amidst sweat, dust, and determination, the foundations of enduring medieval fortresses continue their patient rise. You navigate the castle's outer courtyard, where new defensive features are slowly emerging. The walls are higher, thicker, and more deliberate, arrow slits punctuating the stone at regular intervals. Scaffolds creak under the weight of laborers, who haul mortar and stone upward with meticulous care. The mingled scents of wet stone, smoke from fires, and the metallic tang of iron from blacksmiths create a rich, almost tangible atmosphere of human endeavor. Inside the bailey, life flows in controlled chaos. Women stir cauldrons of thick stew, knead dough in large wooden bowls, and tend fires with soot-blackened hands. Children dart across muddy paths, carrying water or small bundles of wood, occasionally tripping but quickly righting themselves with laughter. Peasants drag heavy stones and timber, their muscles taut with strain, faces streaked with grime. Livestock, pigs, goats, chickens wander freely, weaving unpredictably through human activity. A mainstream historical fact grounds your observations. By the late 12th century, castles began integrating more complex defensive features, like gatehouses with portcullises, murder holes, and drawbridges, designed to control entry and repel attackers. You notice the early stages of such a gatehouse forming: timber supports and partially constructed stone archways, hinting at the future structure. Oddly, a mason has etched a tiny smiling sun into the corner of one of the blocks, a subtle, playful mark hidden amidst the massive stones. Such touches remind you that history is filled with small human signatures, whimsical and enduring despite the weighty purpose of their surroundings. Scholars still debate whether castles emphasize practical defense or psychological intimidation. Here, you feel both simultaneously. The thick walls protect, yet their height and form broadcast authority to any who approach. The duality of purpose is palpable. The moat beyond the walls glistens in the afternoon sun, disturbed by frogs leaping in and dragonflies skimming the surface. Ducks paddle lazily along the murky water. Nature continues its rhythm alongside human labor, persistent and indifferent, yet intertwined with the castle's activity. Within the bailey, daily routines persist. Blacksmiths hammer iron fittings, sparks flying into the damp air. Children navigate carefully among animals while delivering water. Women stir thick soups and bake bread over open flames. The combination of sounds, hammering, chatter, animal calls, and shouted commands, creates a hypnotic rhythm, the heartbeat of the castle itself. From the upper scaffolds, you survey the surrounding countryside. Forests, fields, and distant villages stretch to the horizon. The castle dominates the view, asserting control visually and strategically. Its presence communicates power, security, and surveillance. A whimsical detail catches your eye. A cat perches calmly on a ledge, observing the bustle below. Even amid human toil, life persists. The castle exists within a living, breathing ecosystem, independent yet deeply intertwined with human activity. As night falls, torches ignite along walls and scaffolds, casting flickering shadows across stone, timber, and mud. The castle hums with latent energy, a product of labor, ambition, and survival. Leaning against a partially built wall, you feel the weight of history pressing down. Here, amidst sweat, dust, and stone, the foundations of enduring medieval fortresses continue their slow, deliberate rise. Section 19. You walk along the castle's inner walls, now nearly complete in several sections. The stonework is sturdy, with arrow slits and battlements forming precise defensive patterns. Workers balance on scaffolding, moving heavy stones and mortar with coordinated effort. The creak of timber mixing with hammering and shouted instructions. The air carries the sharp scent of wet stone, smoke from fires, and the faint tang of iron, a testament to relentless labor. The bailey thrives in its organized chaos. Women tend cauldrons of thick stew, knead dough, and stoke fires with hands darkened by soot. Children dart along muddy paths, carrying water or bundles of wood, occasionally slipping but quickly laughing as they rise. Peasants haul heavy stones and timber, muscles straining, faces streaked with grime. Livestock, pigs, goats, chickens, interweave through human activity, adding unpredictable energy to the scene. A mainstream historical fact stands out. By the 13th century, many castles featured multiple layers of walls or concentric designs, enhancing defense by forcing attackers through successive obstacles. You notice early evidence of this strategy in staggered walls and the beginnings of inner towers. Oddly, someone has carved a tiny lizard into the stone near a doorway, an unnoticed flourish in the massive construction. Such small acts of creativity offer glimpses into the human presence behind the stone. an enduring signature amid monumental labor. Scholars still debate whether castles served, primarily as military fortresses or symbols of authority. Here, the massive walls perform both. Protection and psychological intimidation exist side by side. The moat glimmers in the fading light, disturbed by frogs leaping and dragonflies skimming the surface. Ducks paddle lazily. Nature persists alongside human endeavor, moving in its own rhythm while the castle rises. Within the bailey, the daily rhythm continues. Blacksmiths hammer iron fittings, sparks flying into the damp air. Children navigate carefully among animals while carrying water. Women stir soups, bake bread, and tend fires. The combined sounds, hammering, chatter, animal calls, and shouted commands, form a hypnotic rhythm, the heartbeat of the castle. From a high scaffold, you scan the surrounding landscape. Forests, fields, and distant villages stretch toward the horizon. The castle dominates the terrain, asserting authority and providing a strategic vantage point. Its presence communicates power, control, and vigilance simultaneously. A small, whimsical detail catches your eye. A cat perches on a ledge, observing the courtyard with calm detachment. Life persists alongside human endeavor. The castle is a human enterprise existing within a living ecosystem. As dusk settles, torches flicker along walls and scaffolds, casting dancing shadows across stone, timber, and mud. The castle hums with latent energy, the culmination of labor, ambition, and survival. Leaning against a partially built wall, you feel the weight of history pressing down. Amid sweat, dust, and determination, the foundations of enduring medieval fortresses continue their deliberate rise. You step into the castle's central keep, where the labor of decades begins to coalesce into something formidable. Thick stone walls rise around you, their surfaces rough yet purposeful. Scaffolding clatters under the movements of workers, who haul mortar and heavy blocks with practiced precision. The air is rich with the scent of wet stone, smoke from fires, and the faint metallic tang of iron. Every movement is deliberate, a silent choreography of survival, ambition, and endurance. The bailey outside hums with continued life. Women stir cauldrons of stew, knead dough, and tend fires with soot-blackened hands. Children dash along muddy paths, carrying water or bundles of firewood, occasionally slipping but laughing as they regain balance. Peasants drag stones and timber, muscles taut, faces streaked with grime. Livestock, pigs, goats, chickens, interweave with human activity, adding unpredictability and vitality to the scene. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. By the 14th century, keeps were increasingly fortified with thick walls and rounded corners to withstand siege engines and artillery. You notice how the stone curves subtly, hinting at the strategic foresight of architects centuries ahead of their time. Oddly, a mason has etched a tiny fox into a stone corner, its cunning expression almost hidden from plain sight. These subtle carvings provide a glimpse into the personalities of those laboring in harsh conditions, a playful rebellion against monotony. Scholars still debate whether castles were more about defense or dominance. In this keep, both purposes coexist. The walls physically protect, while the imposing structure psychologically asserts authority over the surrounding lands. From the keep's upper windows, you survey the surrounding countryside. Fields, forests, and distant villages stretch toward the horizon. The castle dominates the landscape, a statement of power, vigilance, and control. Its presence is both a deterrent and a reassurance, visible for miles and central to the life of its inhabitants. The moat glistens below, disturbed occasionally by frogs and dragonflies, while ducks paddle lazily along its surface. Nature continues in quiet persistence, a soft counterpoint to human activity. Inside, daily routines remain relentless. Blacksmiths hammer iron fittings, sparks flying into the damp air. Children weave carefully among animals, delivering water. Women stir soups, bake bread, and tend fires, their combined efforts forming the pulse of the castle's life. The rhythm of labor, chatter, and animal sounds becomes a hypnotic cadence. A whimsical detail catches your eye. A cat lounges on a ledge, observing the bustling courtyard below with serene detachment. Even amid chaos, life persists. The castle is not isolated. It exists within a living ecosystem, human and natural intertwined. As night falls, torches light the walls and scaffolds, casting flickering shadows across stone, timber, and mud. The castle hums with quiet energy, the product of labor, ambition, and survival. Leaning against a partially finished wall, you feel the weight of centuries pressing down. Here, in sweat, dust, and stone, the foundations of enduring medieval fortresses stand ready, a testament to the slow, deliberate rise of human ingenuity. Now, you step back from the castle, letting your eyes soften as the torchlight flickers across the stone. The air is cooler now, carrying faint scents of smoke, wet earth, and the distant tang of iron. You feel the rhythm of the day's labor fading into calm. The chaotic symphony of the Bailey, now a gentle hum in your mind. Outside, the countryside stretches into a quiet darkness. Fields and forests merge into soft shadows, and the distant villages are nothing more than faint glimmers of light. A soft breeze rustles through the leaves, carrying the faint croak of frogs and the occasional whisper of wind along the moat. You notice how even in the absence of human activity, life continues. Ducks glide across the water, a cat curls on a ledge, and night insects hum softly. Your thoughts drift through the centuries, imagining the hands that placed each stone, the sweat and grit poured into every wall, every tower. You trace the tiny carved marks left by anonymous masons, a fox here, a bird there, hidden in plain sight for future eyes to discover. These details remind you that history is alive, stitched together by countless small moments of humanity amidst monumental labor. The castle, now mostly complete in your mind's eye, stands as a sentinel over the land, a blend of defense, authority, and artistry. You feel the weight of its history, the quiet triumph of endurance, and the patient determination that shaped each stone. Shadows stretch long along the battlements, flickering as if breathing with the life of centuries past. As you slowly settle into the calm of night, the sounds of the castle fade into the gentle whisper of memory. You imagine walking along the battlements, feeling the rough stone under your fingertips, watching the moonlight dance across towers and walls. Every corner, every slit, every curve tells a story of ambition, survival, and creativity. Take a deep breath. Let the cool night air brush across your face. Feel the quiet pulse of history merging with your own rhythm. The castle, the labor, the life, it all slowly drifts into soft stillness. A gentle lullaby from the past. Now, dim the lights completely. Let your body sink into comfort, and listen to the soft hum of night. Every stone, every tower, every carved detail fades into dreamlike serenity. You are surrounded by centuries of human effort, by quiet victories and whispers of the past. Close your eyes. Breathe. Let the slow, deliberate rise of castles ease into your mind, guiding you gently into sleep. The laborers rest, the animals sleep, The fires smolder low, and the castle stands eternal in your imagination. Tonight, you drift alongside history itself, calm, peaceful, and safe.